John Cena made history on Sunday night at WrestleMania 41 at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas, as it was Cena defeating Cody Rhodes to win the WWE Undisputed Championship, a record-setting 17th world title win for John Cena. And he did it by embracing his heel roots. It was John Cena kicking Cody right in the balls. John Cena using the title belt to get the win. 1, 2, 3. He pins Cody. We have a new champion. And now we start the road to Backlash. But speaking of Backlash and speaking of kicks in the balls, the story kind of heading into this was the idea that, all right, we know we're going to get John Cena versus Cody Rhodes, but who else are we going to get? Who else is going to factor in to this whole thing, right? We assumed that Travis Scott was going to play a role. Like it or not, it made sense to have him there based on what happened in Elimination Chamber. We know the story, how Travis Scott just took it to Cody Rhodes, busted the man's eardrum, all this other stuff, really laid it in with Cody and made it look real because it was real, right? So we thought, all right, Cody Rhodes is going to get his payback on Travis Scott. And he did because Cody delivered the crossroads to him, and that took him out of the match. So now we're all sitting there saying, okay, this is, you're not going to fool us now. We know what's coming. You take Travis Scott out of the equation. It's down to Cena, Cody Rhodes, but there's one more person that has to get involved here to tie it all together. Everything that happened in Elimination Chamber, the most shocking heel turn ever outside of Hulk Hogan joining the NWO. One of the biggest moments in the history of WWE. This is how we tie it all together. They haven't mentioned this guy's name very much on the road to WrestleMania, but now's the time that it's all going to come through. Here he comes, the final boss, The Rock. And then he didn't come. He wasn't there. At least not on screen. He may have been there. We don't know. But we know that The Rock did not play a role in John Cena winning number 17. And maybe, I've seen the argument made, that was the point. You didn't want to have The Rock overshadow, potentially, John Cena winning the championship. You want to let Cena have his moments and all those other things. Well, that would have sounded great and all if John Cena had never turned heel and aligned with The Rock at Elimination Chamber a month and a half or so ago. Because I do remember a visual. I do remember that The Rock was involved in the story because that was one of the biggest reasons why it was so impactful when John Cena turned heel at the Elimination Chamber. It was all about Cody Rhodes. Is he going to sell his soul to The Rock? We were trying to figure out who else could sell their soul to The Rock, right? We knew it wasn't going to be Cody. We said maybe it's CM Punk. Maybe it's Drew McIntyre. There could be other people lining up to sell their soul to one of the most powerful men, not just in the WWE, but in the world, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, the final boss. But instead, it was Cody Rhodes saying no, and it was John Cena saying yes. And so the stare, the big visual, right, of John Cena's face going from all happy to basically that stare. That's one we'll never forget. But he wasn't just staring at the ring post. He was staring at The Rock. And even though you can't see John Cena in this image here, you can see The Rock, you can see Travis Scott. John Cena, The Rock, Travis Scott were all combined. They were all combined together. That was part of the story. And so we can say, and I've heard some of the arguments about, well, hey, come on, this was way more about Cena. This wasn't really about, The Rock as much. Well, it absolutely was about The Rock. And now I guess we do have to wait and see how it play out. But we have to ask the question, why was The Rock not at WrestleMania 41? Why was he not there? Well, look, there's potential reasons we could certainly come up with, right? He put out the Instagram post about how he was in Maui, I believe. Was that? Put it out on Saturday, Sunday, something like that. And we're thinking, okay, this is professional wrestling. We've seen people, pull the wool over our eyes before. We know what he's up to here. He's going to act like he's somewhere else, and then boom, he's going to show up in Las Vegas, and he's going to come out. But he didn't. And so we could say, well, he's got filming duties and all this other stuff, and that's fine. It's The Rock. Again, one of the most powerful people in the world, one of the biggest celebrities in the world, if not the biggest, when it comes to the draw that The Rock is, right? And we understand all that. But here's the problem with this whole thing. If we're trying to figure out why was The Rock not at WrestleMania 41, you have to search for more answers. And maybe we come to the realization that it may make a lot more sense as to why he wasn't there. Was he just not there because this was never really the long-term plan, was to get to this point to where you had The Rock playing a role in this storyline in the long term? Because if so, that's a problem, right? Remember back when The Rock makes his return on the SmackDown in New Orleans. Did they promote that a week ahead of time? No. Did they promote that several days ahead of time? No. It was something that just happened on the fly, right? And it felt somewhat familiar because we remember back to Bad Blood last October. We all wondered, there were rumors building that The Rock could potentially show up there, and he did. It made sense seemingly for his schedule. He was in the Atlanta area at the time. He shows up at the end, and what does he do, right? He holds up the numbers. He holds up the fingers. He looks in the ring. There's Roman Reigns. There's Cody Rhodes. And we're all thinking, okay, now it's time to go. Long-term planning for the win. You've got potential triple threat at WrestleMania 41. You've got a potential one-on-one match between The Rock and Roman, The Rock and Cody, all these things that could play out, right? And then everything just kind of dropped. And then, fast forward, as we said, to the SmackDown in New Orleans, where The Rock makes his big return. Pretty much, short notice. He decides to come back, and he's there. He announces WrestleMania 42 is going to take place in New Orleans. Great. And then we get into that whole thing with The Rock trying to get Cody Rhodes to be his corporate champion. The Rock trying to get Cody Rhodes to sell the soul. And then we're off and running from there because it wasn't just the SmackDown. It was immediately going into Elimination Chamber, right? And so you're thinking, all right, now we're cooking. We're cooking up something here real big. Triple H is cooking up something. The Rock, I guess, is cooking up something because we know he's part of this whole thing when it comes to how perhaps these stories are playing out. And so we get to Elimination Chamber. You have the big moment, the big turn, and it's all logically there to be like, okay, now the next step is to see what happens from the Elimination Chamber to the biggest show of the year. It wasn't going from Elimination Chamber to a random show in, whatever, September, whatever you want to do, right? It's going from Elimination Chamber to WrestleMania. And then we started to have those different things where it's like, okay, they're not really mentioning The Rock here in these promos. John Cena's not really bringing up the reason why The Rock was involved in all this other stuff. He's not really bringing it up. Why is he not saying it? Okay, it's been 1 week. We're going to give him a pass here, but he'll bring it up next week. Well, the next week goes by. Not really explaining that a whole lot. The next week goes by. Not really explaining a whole lot. It's about John Cena versus the fans. It's not really talking about The Rock and all these other things, right? And then what happens? We get to the moment where we're like, all right, they have to do it now. It has to be at WrestleMania, right? But again, he's not there. The Rock's not there to be involved in the story. And so, if we are trying to come up with the reason as to why this took place, why this has been such a disappointing finish in many people's eyes, it's because if you think about the whole package here, is it just a matter of, hey, maybe the reports were true. Maybe some of the stuff out there was true, right? About maybe it is simply a case that when The Rock wants to do something with WWE, The Rock does something with WWE. And perhaps that's great for business at the time. And it's going to continue to be something where business-wise, WWE's not exactly hurting here. But from a fan perception standpoint, it's easy to now see why there is some of the backlash and the criticism of the idea that maybe this is simply, hey, The Rock comes in and does what The Rock wants to do, and everything else can just play out whenever it plays out, right? And he can come in when he can come in. He's a busy man. He's got the filming. He's got all this other stuff. And we understand that part. But is the reason as simple as, hey, we're going to do this now and we can figure out everything else later? Because if that is the case, then you run into some of the situations that we've seen on the road to WrestleMania 41 and at WrestleMania 41 specifically, where if this was never the plan, and we know what's going to happen here. When The Rock does come back eventually, there will probably be some sort of, compelling case as to why this was always the plan. The plan was to never put The Rock at WrestleMania, which I just can't logically make sense of. Because if you're going to bring him back into the story, this would have absolutely been the place to do it. Why? It's not just the fact that having The Rock involved in John Cena winning number 17. It's having The Rock involved in doing it by defeating the person who has become the arch nemesis of The Rock, and that is Cody Rhodes. That's a story they've been telling all the way back a year ago, right? So if we want to talk about long-term stories and all this other stuff, why wouldn't you have The Rock play a role here? Now, I've heard some people also say, well, The Rock's just not going to get his hands dirty. He's going to send out Travis Scott to do this, right? Because the three-man power team, The Rock, John Cena, and Travis Scott. That's apparently the new team. So The Rock's just going to sit back, let Travis Scott do the dirty work, and then he'll come back when the time is right. They can absolutely sell us that story. And there's a reason we could eventually buy it, maybe. But I think when you look at this as a whole, and you have to put this entire situation in context here, this wasn't just The Rock not showing up right at WrestleMania. It's the context of John Cena wins number 17 after hitting how many AAs in this match? How many times did he hit his finisher? And he couldn't finish off Cody. But all it took was the finish of hitting him with a championship belt. And then, again, having Travis Scott be somewhat of a factor in the finish of the match. But it also ends the reign of Cody Rhodes. The whole story, everything that you built up last year. Cody's had this incredible run since last year at WrestleMania 40. Sure, it started a little bit slow. We all remember that. Like you're thinking, okay, it's got to pick up a little bit, got to pick up. Well, it picked up eventually. But this is how you end it, where it's basically he gets hit with a belt shot. He's taking all the AAs. That's great. John Cena's ruined wrestling. And I know that's also some arguments I've heard made. Well, this is great. This is exactly how it's supposed to be. Cena's ruining wrestling. He didn't want The Rock to be there because he knew it'd make the fans happy. He's just going to ruin it for everyone, right? And he's going to ruin Raw tonight, as he said, following WrestleMania last night. So maybe that's how they sell it. And you know what? Maybe The Rock shows up on Raw after WrestleMania. And maybe this is all for naught to be like, okay, great. They had the plan. And The Rock's there. This was an absolutely, kind of easy layup type situation where it's WrestleMania. It's the biggest show of the year. And for all the potential criticism that you can kind of take away after not really tying The Rock into John Cena's explanation following the big turn in Elimination Chamber, this was a way to wipe out that criticism, right? To have him there, to have him play a role. And it just didn't happen. So when we're coming up with a reason, we can say, well, it may be due to filming, it may be due to this, or it may simply be that it's true. The Rock comes back, does what he wants to do because he's one of the most powerful people out there. The power he has with TKO, the power he has with WWE, it eclipses anyone else in terms of deciding he's going to do what he wants to do when he wants to do it. And sometimes maybe that comes at the expense of Triple H's long-term planning to where they have to basically figure out ways to craft the story around his availability. Whereas logically, it's not always going to make sense. They can move forward. It's a big year for John Cena. He's going to probably get Randy Orton coming up in several weeks at Backlash in St. Louis. It'll be a great atmosphere. It's going to be an incredible moment. But that doesn't mean we can't criticize the way this thing played out. I think on night 2 at WrestleMania 41. Maybe there never was a huge long-term plan in place, even though they've tried to convince us of that. He's tried to convince us of that. Maybe there never was this huge long-term thing in play, right? And if that's the case, then you've got to understand when there is backlash, when there is criticism, because I think it's understandable why the fans should feel this way, because it doesn't seem like this was something that was part of this big long-term plan. This is the direction they've decided to go. And you know what? We wait and see when The Rock comes back into it because he has to come back into it now. By the time this thing's over for John Cena at the end of 2025, The Rock has to come back into the story. If he doesn't, we're going to look back and be like, what the hell was Elimination Chamber for? Because otherwise, you could have done what? You could have done the John Cena heel turn where he wins the title just in the exact same way last night at WrestleMania 41. He does the same stuff. He turns heel, wins the title there. The Rock has no involvement whatsoever. But because you set the expectation that The Rock was going to be involved in this all the way back at Elimination Chamber, it's absolutely fair to now, I think, see the disappointment from fans and understand that, hey, it makes sense. So how do you think it plays out from here? What did you think about The Rock not being there? What did you think about John Cena winning number 17? Let me know your thoughts. Hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Always appreciate the support of the channel. And let me know your thoughts on The Rock not being at WrestleMania 41.